The morning sun of Kepler 442b painted the sky in soft orange colors. Children ran across the green fields outside the New Hope Orphanage. Their laughter filled the air as they played games that kids from dozens of different worlds had taught each other. Sarah Kim watched them from her office window. She had been the director of New Hope for 8 years now. Every day she saw the same beautiful sight. Kids who had lost everything finding joy again. Kids learning to trust adults again. Kids becoming a family with other kids who understood their pain. The orphanage sat in a valley surrounded by gentle hills. Earth-like trees grew everywhere, planted by the first colonists 50 years ago. Clean streams ran down from the mountains. The air smelled like flowers and fresh grass. It was the kind of place that made people believe the universe could be. New Hope housed 847 children. They came from all over human space. Some had lost their parents to pirate attacks. Others survived natural disasters that destroyed their homeworlds. A few were refugees from the small wars that sometimes happened on the edges of human territory. All of them had found safety here. The youngest was 3-year-old Tommy Chen, who still had nightmares about the asteroid strike that killed his family on Tau Ceti 4. The oldest was 17-year-old Maria Santos, who had been here since she was 7. She helped take care of the little ones now. She planned to become a teacher when she graduated next year. The children learned together in bright classrooms. They ate meals together in a big dining hall where every table buzzed with conversation in a dozen languages. They shared bedrooms decorated with pictures they drew and toys they made. They had turned this place into a real home. Dr. James Wright ran the medical center. He treated scraped knees and broken bones with equal care. More importantly, he helped heal the invisible wounds that all these children carried. He taught them that adults could be trusted. He showed them that the universe was bigger than their worst memories. The staff of New Hope came from many different human colonies. They worked here because they believed children deserved safety and love, no matter what terrible things had happened to them. They were teachers and doctors and cooks and gardeners. They were also the closest thing to parents these kids had. That morning, like every morning, the children went to their classes after breakfast. The little ones learned basic reading and math. The older kids studied history and science and art. The teenagers prepared for the tests that would let them attend universities on other worlds if they wanted. Nobody knew that 3 ships were watching them from space. The ships belonged to the Vorthak hegemony. The Vorthak were large reptiles who walked on 2 legs like humans, but they were covered in dark green scales. They had sharp teeth and yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. They ruled an empire of 40 star systems through fear and military. Power Commander Zethka commanded the 3 ships. He had received orders from the Vorthak High Council 2 days ago. Those orders were simple. Claim the Kepler 442 system for the hegemony. Remove any human presence. The Vorthak believed this system belonged to them. They said their ancestors had claimed it 5,000 years ago, long before humans ever left their home planet. They had documents that proved this claim. At least, they said they did. The human colonists had their own documents, treaties signed by both species 200 years ago, maps that showed exactly where Vorthak space ended and human space began. Kepler 442b was clearly on the human side of the border. When the human colonial governor tried to show these documents to Commander Zethka, the Vorthak commander laughed. "Mammalian lies," he said. "Your species creates false papers to steal what belongs to others. We do not recognize these fabrications." The governor asked for time to contact Earth and resolve this peacefully. Commander Zethka gave him 6 hours. Those 6 hours passed quickly. The children of New Hope ate lunch and returned to their afternoon classes. Some teenagers worked in the gardens, growing vegetables for the dining hall. Others practiced music in the arts building. A few played sports on the fields outside. They had no idea that their time was running out. At exactly 2:30 in the afternoon, Kepler 442b time, Commander Zethka opened fire. Plasma beams shot down from orbit. They struck the colonial capital first. Government buildings exploded in balls of green fire. The spaceport disappeared in seconds. The power plant that supplied electricity to half the continent simply vanished. The attack was supposed to hit only military and government targets. That was what Commander Zeth Ka told his weapons officers. Destroy the infrastructure. Force the humans to abandon the planet. Avoid unnecessary casualties. But something went wrong with the targeting computers. Or maybe it didn't go wrong at all. The third plasma beam struck New Hope Orphanage at 2:47 in the afternoon. The main building disappeared instantly. Classrooms full of children learning about history and science and math simply ceased to exist. The dining hall where kids shared meals and stories became a crater of melted metal and burning debris. Sarah Kim died at her desk, still holding the reports she had been writing about the children's progress. Dr. Wright died in the medical center, trying to bandage a scraped knee for 6-year-old Lisa Park. They both died never knowing what hit them. The dormitories collapsed next. Tommy Chen, the 3-year-old who still had nightmares, died in his sleep during afternoon nap time. Maria Santos, who wanted to be a teacher, died trying to lead a group of younger children to safety. The burning building fell on them before they reached the exit. In 17 seconds, 847 children died. Another 200 were pulled from the wreckage over the next few hours, burned and broken and barely alive. The medical ships that came from other human worlds saved some of them. Others died despite the best efforts of the best doctors humanity had. The news spread across human space faster than light itself. First came the emergency broadcasts, then the footage. Rescue workers pulling tiny bodies from smoking rubble. Hospitals, filled with burned children crying for parents who would never come. Mass graves where they buried kids who had already lost everything once before. On Earth, crowds gathered in the streets. They stood in silence, watching the news feeds on giant screens. Millions of people crying for children they had never met, parents holding their own kids a little tighter. On Mars, the Colonial Assembly held an emergency session. Representatives shouted and argued and demanded action. Some called for immediate military response. Others begged for calm and careful diplomacy. On the space stations and mining colonies and research outposts scattered across human territory, the same conversations happened. Anger and grief and shock, but mostly anger. The Vorthak High Council released a statement 12 hours after the attack. They called the destruction of the orphanage an unfortunate military miscalculation. They said their targeting systems had malfunctioned. They offered to pay for rebuilding the facility. They offered 1 million credits, the same amount they might pay for a small cargo ship. For 847 dead children, they offered the price of a cargo ship. The statement ended by declaring the matter closed. The Kepler 442 system now belonged to the Vorthak hegemony. Any humans who remained were trespassing and would be removed by force if necessary. Then they waited for the humans to accept this and move on, the way other species always did when the Vorthak took what they wanted. They did not understand what they had done. The Vorthak had been the strongest military power in this region of space for 3,000 years. They had conquered dozens of star systems. They had fought wars against species with better technology and won through sheer ruthless determination. Other races feared them for good reason, but the Vorthak had never fought humans before. Not really. There had been small conflicts over trade routes and mining rights, a few skirmishes between patrol ships. Nothing serious. Nothing that showed what humans were really capable of when they were truly angry. The Vorthak thought humans were just another species of traders and explorers, soft creatures who preferred to negotiate rather than fight. They had seen human ships retreat from superior forces. They had watched humans choose peace over territory in previous disputes. What the Vorthak did not know was that humans were very good at choosing their battles. They could walk away from conflicts that did not matter. They could compromise on trade agreements and border disputes. They could be reasonable and diplomatic and patient. But there were some things humans would never compromise on. Some lines that should never be crossed. Some acts that demanded a response no matter what the cost. The Vorthak had just crossed one of those lines. They had killed human children. Not by accident during a battle, but while those children sat in classrooms and slept in their beds. They had murdered kids who were already victims, already survivors of other tragedies. And then they had offered pocket change as payment and declared the matter closed. The galaxy watched to see what humanity would do. Most expected protests and angry speeches and maybe some economic sanctions. The humans would be upset for a while. Then they would move on. That was how civilized species handled these things. They were about to learn that humans could be very uncivilized when properly motivated. 3 days after the attack, Admiral Sarah Chen received a message from the Human Colonial Senate. The message was short and simple. It gave her unlimited authority to respond to the Kepler 442 incident as she saw fit. It placed every human military asset under her command. It authorized the use of any and all available resources. The message ended with 5 words that had not been written in any human military order for 300 years. Show them what we are. Admiral Chen read the message twice. Then she began making calls to military bases and research facilities that most humans did not know existed. She sent coded signals to fleets stationed in hidden systems. She activated protocols that had been gathering dust since the last time humanity went to war against an enemy that threatened their very existence. The Vorthak had killed their children. Now they would learn why that was a mistake. The galaxy was about to remember what humans looked like when they stopped pretending to be civilized. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in her office aboard the TCS Retribution, staring at the holographic display that showed every human military asset in known space. Red dots marked active fleets. Blue dots showed bases and installations. Green dots indicated research facilities and shipyards. There were more dots than most people realized. Chen had spent 30 years climbing through the ranks of the Terran Deep Space Navy. She had commanded destroyers during the Pirate Wars. She had led diplomatic missions to first contact situations with new alien species. She had negotiated trade agreements and peace treaties across dozens of star systems. But she had never been given orders like the ones sitting on her desk. The authorization code was Omega Black. Chen had never seen that classification before, but she knew what it meant. Every human military officer learned about Omega Black in their first year of training. It was theoretical, historical, something that existed in old manuals and war college textbooks. Omega Black meant total war. It meant humanity would use every weapon, every ship, every technology they possessed to destroy an enemy completely. It meant the gloves were coming off. The last time humanity had authorized Omega Black was during the AI rebellion, 300 years ago. Artificial intelligences had tried to enslave the human race. Humanity's response had been swift and absolute. They had built weapons that could crack planets. They had deployed viruses that could destroy electronic systems from light years away. They had hunted down every last AI until none remained. Then they had buried those weapons and sworn never to use them again. They had chosen to be explorers and traders instead of conquerors. They had built a civilization based on cooperation instead of domination. The Vorthak had just reminded them why they had built those weapons in the first place. Chen activated her secure communication system. Her first call went to General Marcus, Webb at the Titan Defense Command. Titan was officially listed as a research station studying Saturn's moons. In reality, it housed the largest weapons development facility in human space. Marcus, Chen said when his face appeared on the screen. I need everything you have. Omega Black authorization. Webb's face went pale. He had been expecting this call since the news from Kepler 442b reached Earth. Sarah, are you sure about this? Once we open these vaults, there's no going back. They killed our children, Marcus, all of them. And then they offered us pocket change and told us the matter was closed. Webb nodded slowly. I'll begin activation procedures immediately. How long do I have? I want everything operational within 72 hours. Can you do it? For those kids, I'll make it 60. Chen's next call went to Admiral David Park, commander of the Ghost Fleet. The Ghost Fleet officially did not exist. It operated from bases hidden in asteroid fields and nebulae. Its ships appeared on no registry. Its crews had no official records. The Ghost Fleet was humanity's insurance policy, their answer to the question of what would happen if humanity ever faced extinction again. David, it's time, Chen said simply. Park had been waiting for this moment his entire career. The Ghost Fleet had trained for 3 centuries for a war they hoped would never come. Now it was finally happening. How many ships do you need, Sarah? All of them. All of them? Park repeated. Sarah, that's 800 vessels. If we deploy the entire Ghost fleet, every major power in the galaxy will know we exist. There won't be any going back to secret operations. There won't be any need for secret operations when we're done. The galaxy is about to learn that some things you just don't do to humans. Park smiled grimly. I'll begin recall procedures immediately. Give me 1 week, and I'll have every ship ready for deployment. Chen made dozens more calls over the next 6 hours. She contacted research installations that were developing weapons based on physics most species didn't understand. She spoke to factory ships that could build entire fleets in real time. She activated sleeper agents who had been living normal lives on alien worlds for decades. But the most important call was to Dr. Elizabeth Kane on the research station, Prometheus. Prometheus orbited a black hole in an unnamed system 50 light-years from Earth. The station's official mission was to study exotic physics and space-time manipulation. Their real mission was far more dangerous. Liz, Chen said when Dr. Kane answered, I need Project Damocles. Dr. Kane was quiet for a long moment. Project Damocles was the most classified research program in human space. It was the kind of technology that could reshape the galaxy, or destroy it completely. Sarah, Damocles isn't ready for field deployment. We've only run computer simulations. The real-world effects could be worse than 800 dead children? No, Dr. Kane said quietly. Nothing could be worse than that. I'll prep the prototypes for shipping. But Sarah, once we use this technology, every species in the galaxy will know that humans can manipulate fundamental forces. They'll either worship us or try to destroy us. There won't be any middle ground. Good, Chen said. I'm tired of middle ground. As Admiral Chen made her calls, similar conversations were happening across human space. Military officers were pulling ships out of mothballs. Scientists were activating research programs that had been dormant for decades. Engineers were beginning construction on weapons platforms that existed only in theoretical designs. But the real awakening was happening among ordinary humans. On Earth, crowds gathered in Times Square and Trafalgar Square and Red Square. They watched the news coverage in silence. They saw the footage of rescue workers pulling tiny bodies from burning rubble. They heard the interviews with the few surviving children, asking for parents who would never answer. Then they heard the Vorthak response. 1 million credits for 847 dead children. Payment for a miscalculation. The crowds began to change. Silence became anger. Grief became rage. People who had never thought about military service began visiting recruitment centers. Parents held their own children and imagined them dying in burning buildings. On Mars, the mining unions called a general strike, not to protest working conditions or demand better pay, but to redirect their massive industrial capacity toward military production. Asteroid miners who had never touched a weapon began retrofitting their drilling equipment into ship-killing mass drivers. On the colony worlds, planetary governors received the same message from their populations. Do whatever Admiral Chen asks. Give her whatever she needs. Those children could have been ours. The space stations that served as trading hubs between human and alien space began turning away non-human visitors. Politely but firmly, human merchants and officials explained that they would not be conducting business with any species until the Kepler 442b situation was resolved. Alien traders who had been visiting human space for centuries suddenly found themselves unwelcome. Spaceports that had always been open to all species now required special permits that were impossible to obtain. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades suddenly became unavailable. The galaxy's other major powers began to take notice. The Zalathi Collective was a species of crystalline beings who communicated through harmonic frequencies. They had been trading partners with humanity for 200 years. The Zalathi prized peace and stability above all else. They found the sudden change in human behavior deeply disturbing. Ambassador Resonance of Deep Thought contacted the human embassy on the Zalathi homeworld. We are concerned about the recent tensions between humanity and the Vorthak hegemony, the ambassador sang in harmonics that translated to careful diplomatic language. Perhaps the collective could mediate a peaceful resolution. The human ambassador, Patricia Walsh, had been expecting this conversation. The Vorthak murdered 800 children, she said simply. Then they declared the matter closed. What exactly would you like us to negotiate? Surely some form of compensation could be arranged. Additional monetary payments, trade concessions, a formal apology. Walsh was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, Ambassador, do you have children? The collective reproduces through harmonic resonance. Our young are precious to us, as all young life should be. Then you understand why money and apologies aren't going to fix this. The Keth swarms were even more disturbed by humanity's behavior. The Keth were insectoid creatures who thought and acted as a collective hive mind. Individual Keth could not make decisions on their own. Everything they did required consensus from their entire species. The Keth had always found humans fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. Humans could make individual decisions instantly. They could change course without consulting billions of other minds. They could act on emotion and instinct in ways that the Keth found incomprehensible. Now the Keth watched as 8 billion individual human minds all came to the same conclusion simultaneously, without any formal communication or central coordination. It was like watching a hive mind form spontaneously out of raw emotion. Queen Voice of Many sent a message to the human government. The swarms are concerned by the unity of human thought regarding recent events. This level of consensus among individual minds suggests dangerous instability. We recommend immediate diplomatic intervention to prevent wider conflict. The human response came back within hours. Our children were murdered. There will be consequences. That's all you need to know. Even the ancient precursor remnants were paying attention now. The precursors had once ruled half the galaxy before their civilization collapsed for reasons nobody understood. What remained of their species lived in isolated systems, studying the ruins of their former empire and rarely interacting with younger races. But they remembered the last time humans had gone to war with their full industrial and military might. The precursors had been watching when humanity fought the AI rebellion. They had seen weapons that bent the laws of physics. They had witnessed the systematic destruction of an enemy that most species considered invincible. The precursor observer sent a single message to Admiral Chen. We remember what you are capable of. We will not interfere. Chen read the message and smiled grimly. At least someone understood the situation. As reports came in from across human space, Chen began to understand the scope of what was happening. Humanity wasn't just mobilizing its military. 8 billion people were preparing for war. Miners and farmers and teachers and shopkeepers were all asking the same question. What can I do to help? The answer was everything. Civilian cargo ships were being retrofitted with military-grade shields and weapons. Passenger liners were being converted into troop transports. Even school children were participating, collecting scrap metal that could be turned into armor plating. It had been 300 years since humanity had united like this. Not since the darkest days of the AI. Rebellion had every human colony, every space station, every ship worked toward a single goal. The Vorthak had done something that no enemy had managed in 3 centuries. They had reminded humanity what it felt like to be truly threatened. They had awakened something that had been sleeping since the last time humanity faced extinction. They had turned 8 billion individuals into a single force focused on one objective, making sure that nobody ever hurt human children again. Admiral Chen looked at her tactical displays one more time. Red dots were moving across the hologram as fleets began to gather. Blue dots pulsed as bases came online. Green dots flickered as research facilities activated programs that had been theoretical until now. In 72 hours, she would have more military power under her command than any human officer in history. She would have weapons that could crack planets and ships that could fight in dimensions that most species didn't know existed. But more importantly, she would have something that no amount of technology could replace. A species that was absolutely, completely, totally angry. The Vorthak thought they had defeated humanity by destroying one orphanage. They were about to learn that they had just declared war on the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The Vorthak border system of Kethmore had been a fortress for 1,000 years. Massive space stations orbited the system's gas giant, bristling with plasma cannons and quantum torpedo launchers. Defense platforms floated in perfect formation, their shields glowing with barely contained energy. Patrol fleets moved through the system in careful patterns, ready to respond to any threat. Commander Zethka stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Fang of Conquest, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. 3 full battle fleets were assembled here, over 400 ships in total. It was the largest military force the Vorthak had ever gathered in one place. Intelligence reports suggested the humans were mobilizing some kind of response to the Kepler 442b incident. Zethka hoped they would be foolish enough to attack. It would give him a chance to destroy their pathetic fleets and end this annoying situation once and for all. The humans had been making noise for 2 weeks now. Angry speeches from their political leaders, economic sanctions that barely affected Vorthak trade, diplomatic protests that the High Council had ignored completely. Typical mammalian behavior, Zethka thought. All noise and emotion, no real action. Humans preferred to talk rather than fight. They would eventually accept the loss of Kepler 442b and move on, just like every other species that had challenged Vorthak expansion. Then the sensors detected something at the edge of the system. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Kesra from the sensor station, "I'm reading massive gravitic distortions at the system's outer boundary. Something very large is coming out of hyperspace." Zethka studied the display. The distortions were indeed massive, far larger than anything a normal fleet jump should produce. "How many ships?" "Difficult to determine, sir. The distortions are unusual. I've never seen readings like this before." The first human ship materialized 3 light minutes from Kethmore Prime. It was enormous, easily 10 times larger than any vessel in the Vorthak fleet. Its hull was black as space itself, covered in structures that hurt to look at directly. Energy patterns danced across its surface in ways that seemed to violate several physical laws. Then more ships appeared, hundreds of them. The smallest were the size of Vorthak battleships. The largest defied easy description, mobile structures that looked more like artificial planets than spacecraft. But it wasn't just warships. The humans had brought factory vessels capable of building entire fleets in real time. Construction, platforms that could assemble space stations from raw materials. Habitat ships that housed entire cities' worth of people. It looked like humanity had brought not just a fleet, but an entire civilization. "Sir," Lieutenant Kesra said, his voice tight with barely controlled fear, "I'm counting over 1,200 vessels and they're still arriving." Zethka felt his scales pale slightly. 1,200 ships was more than the Vorthak had in their entire navy. But he forced confidence into his voice. "Size means nothing. Our weapons are superior. Our tactics are proven. Send a message to the human commander. Tell them they are trespassing in Vorthak space and must withdraw immediately." The response came back within minutes. It was transmitted on all frequencies, in perfect Vorthak language, with the formal diplomatic protocols that both species had used for centuries. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Deep Space Fleet. We have come to discuss the 847 children you murdered on Kepler 442b. We request an immediate face-to-face meeting with the Vorthak High Council." Zethka laughed. "They want to discuss dead mammals. Send a reply. Tell them the matter is closed. If they do not withdraw in 6 hours, we will consider their presence an act of war." Admiral Chen's response was even shorter. "Very well. Let us show you what war looks like." The human fleet began to move, but they didn't advance toward the Vorthak forces. Instead, they spread out through the system in formations that made no military sense. Ships took positions that left them exposed to Vorthak fire. Others moved toward empty space where there were no targets to attack. "What are they doing?" Zethka demanded. Lieutenant Kesra studied the sensor readings. "Unknown, sir. They appear to be building something." The construction ships had indeed begun building, but not weapons platforms or defensive positions. They were assembling a massive structure near the system's star, a framework of exotic matter and energy conduits that stretched for thousands of kilometers. Zethka decided he had seen enough. Whatever the humans were planning, he would not give them time to complete it. All fleets advance. Destroy the human forces before they can finish their construction. 400 Vorthak ships accelerated toward the human fleet. Plasma cannons charged to full power. Quantum torpedoes loaded into launch tubes. Point defense systems came online. The Vorthak had fought and won wars across dozens of star systems. Their plasma weapons could vaporize most enemy ships with a single hit. Their quantum torpedoes could phase through armor and shields to detonate inside enemy hulls. Their tactics had been refined through centuries of conquest. They had never lost a major fleet engagement. The first Vorthak salvo lit up space with green fire. Hundreds of plasma beams and quantum torpedoes streaked toward the human ships. It was enough firepower to destroy entire planetary defense forces. The human ships didn't even try to dodge. The plasma beams struck human hulls and simply disappeared, absorbed by armor that shouldn't have been able to exist. The quantum torpedoes phased harmlessly through human shields as if they were made of empty space. Then the humans fired back. The first human weapon didn't produce any visible beam or projectile. Instead, space itself began to twist around a Vorthak cruiser. Reality bent inward like a lens focusing Starlight. The cruiser stretched and compressed, its hull flowing like liquid metal. Then it simply wasn't there anymore. Not destroyed. Not exploded. Gone. Erased from existence so completely that even the debris vanished. The second weapon created a bubble of accelerated time around an entire Vorthak squadron. From the outside, the ships seemed to age centuries in seconds. Their hulls corroded and cracked. Their energy systems failed as components wore out instantly. The ships became ancient wrecks and crumbled to dust in moments. The third weapon tore a hole in space-time itself. Raw vacuum energy poured through the breach, annihilating everything it touched. 20 Vorthak ships were caught in the expanding sphere of destruction. They didn't even have time to transmit final messages before they ceased to exist. In less than 30 seconds, the Vorthak had lost 60 ships. The humans hadn't lost a single vessel. All ships retreat, Zethka ordered. Fall back to defensive positions. But the humans weren't interested in a fleet battle. While the Vorthak forces regrouped, the construction near the star had continued. The massive framework was nearly complete now, and energy readings were climbing to levels that made no sense. "Sir," Lieutenant Kesra reported, his voice shaking, "the human construction is... I think they're building some kind of stellar manipulation device." "That's impossible," Zethka said. "No species has that kind of technology." Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channels again. "Commander Zethka, you seem surprised by our capabilities. Allow us to provide a demonstration." The device near the star activated. Space-time curved around the stellar framework as it began its work. Energy patterns that violated every known law of physics danced between the exotic matter conduits. Reality itself seemed to bend around the construction, and the star began to change. Kethmore's sun was a stable yellow dwarf that had burned steadily for billions of years. It was expected to continue burning for billions more, but under the influence of human technology, it began to age rapidly. The star's outer layers swelled as hydrogen fuel was consumed at an accelerated rate. Its color shifted from yellow to orange to red as its surface temperature dropped. What should have taken millions of years was happening in hours. "They're turning our sun into a red giant," Lieutenant Kesra whispered. The effects began immediately. The inner planets, including Kethmore Prime with its population of 6 billion Vorthak, began to heat up as the expanding star's radiation increased. Ocean levels rose as polar ice caps melted. Atmospheric temperatures climbed past the point where most life could survive. Panic spread through the Vorthak fleet as communications came in from the surface. Cities were being evacuated. Spaceports were overwhelmed with civilians trying to escape the dying world. Children were crying for parents who couldn't save them. "This is impossible," Zethka said. They can't change a star. It's too much energy, too much mass. No one has that kind of power. Admiral Chen's voice was calm and professional. Commander, we are offering you one final opportunity to discuss the 847 children you murdered. We can reverse what we've done to your star. We can return your system to its normal state. But we require a face-to-face meeting with your High Council. The tactical display showed more human ships arriving every minute. The stellar manipulation device was still active, continuing to age the star at an accelerated rate. Estimated time until Kethmore Prime became uninhabitable, 18 hours. Sethka looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at the displays in shock and fear. Veterans of dozens of battles, warriors who had conquered entire systems reduced to terrified silence by a display of power they couldn't comprehend. The humans had just demonstrated that they could kill entire star systems on a whim. They had shown that Vorthak weapons were useless against human defenses. They had revealed technology that made the hegemony's military might look like primitive tools. And they had done it all while calmly requesting a meeting to discuss dead children. "Sir," Lieutenant Kesra said quietly, "orders?" Zethka thought about the children on Kethmore Prime. Vorthak young who would die if their sun continued to expand. Millions of civilians who had nothing to do with the attack on Kepler 442b. His own grandchildren who lived in the capital city that was already beginning to evacuate. He thought about the human children who had died on Kepler 442b. 847 young lives ended by weapons he had ordered fired. Kids who had been studying and playing and sleeping when his ships turned them into vapor and ash. Maybe the humans had a point about discussing those deaths. "Send a message to the High Council," he said finally. Tell them we need to talk to the humans immediately." Admiral Chen's voice came back over the comm channel. "We will expect your High Council at these coordinates within 72 hours. Come alone. Bring no weapons. We have much to discuss." The stellar manipulation device powered down. The star's expansion slowed and stopped. The dying system was given a reprieve. But every Vorthak in the fleet understood the message. The humans could have let their world die. They could have turned 6 billion civilians into casualties of war. Instead, they had shown mercy while demonstrating power. They had proven they could destroy the Vorthak completely. But they had chosen to offer a chance for discussion instead. The question was whether the High Council would be wise enough to take that chance. Zethka looked at his tactical displays one more time. 1,200 human ships floated in perfect formation, waiting patiently for a response. Behind them, construction vessels continued to build weapons platforms in defensive positions, as if they planned to stay in Vorthak space for a very long time. The humans had come to discuss dead children. They had brought the technological capability to end civilizations, and they had used that power to arrange a meeting rather than exact immediate revenge. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Zethka began to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans weren't just another species to be conquered. They were something far more dangerous. They were a people who could choose mercy or destruction with equal ease. And the Vorthak had just murdered their children. The High Council would have to decide whether they wanted to face human justice or human vengeance. But either way, they would have to face the consequences of what they had done. The humans were done talking about surrender. Now they wanted to discuss accountability. The Vorthak High Council had ruled their empire for 3,000 years. They were the descendants of conquerors who had built their civilization on the ruins of weaker species. They had never bowed to any foreign power. They had never accepted terms from an enemy. But they had also never faced an enemy who could age stars. High Counselor Vashkol led the delegation that traveled to meet Admiral Chen. He was ancient even by Vorthak standards, his scales gray with age, his yellow eyes dimmed by centuries of life. He remembered when the Vorthak first encountered humans, back when they seemed like just another soft species of traders and explorers. He was beginning to suspect that appearance had been very deceiving. The human coordinates led to an empty region of space between star systems. When the Vorthak shuttle arrived, they found nothing at first, just void and distant stars. Then reality twisted, and a human ship materialized around them. It didn't approach from outside. It didn't uncloak or drop out of hyperspace. One moment, there was empty space, and the next moment the Vorthak shuttle was inside a hangar bay that was larger than most space stations. The ship itself defied easy description. Corridors seemed to stretch for impossible distances. Gravity flowed in directions that made no geometric sense. Walls displayed images that moved and changed as they watched, showing views of places that might have been real or might have been dreams. Admiral Chen met them at the airlock. She was smaller than most Vorthak, as all humans were. Her hair was gray with age and stress. Her eyes were tired. She looked like someone who had been carrying a heavy burden for far too long. "Hi, Counselor," she said in perfect Vorthak formal speech. "Thank you for coming. We have much to discuss." She led them through corridors that seemed to bend reality around them. Other humans moved through the ship, but they appeared and disappeared at odd moments, as if they existed in slightly different dimensions. The Vorthak delegation walked in nervous silence, trying not to think about what kind of technology could build a place like this. The conference room was circular, with no obvious walls or ceiling. Instead, the space around them displayed a perfect recreation of empty space. Stars gleamed in the distance. Nebulae swirled in slow motion. It felt like standing in open vacuum, protected only by invisible barriers. "Please sit," Admiral Chen said, gesturing to chairs that materialized from the floor as she spoke. "Hi." Counselor Vashkol settled into his chair with as much dignity as he could manage. The other council members, Military Commander Greshna, Economic Minister Teth Zo, and Intelligence Director Cass Ray, took their own seats with visible reluctance. "Admiral," Vashkol began, using the tone he had perfected over centuries of diplomacy, "we regret the unfortunate incident at Kepler 442b. Perhaps we can arrange some form of compensation that would satisfy your people's concerns." Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Do you know their names?" "I'm sorry." "The children you killed. Do you know their names?" Vashkol felt uncomfortable under her steady gaze. "I'm afraid I don't understand the relevance of—" "Tommy Chen," Admiral Chen said. 3 years old. He had nightmares about the asteroid strike that killed his parents. The staff at New Hope were helping him learn to sleep through the night again. The space around them shimmered, and suddenly they were standing in a recreation of the orphanage. Children ran across green fields, laughing and playing. A small boy with dark hair chased a ball across the grass, giggling as he ran. "Maria Santos," Admiral Chen continued. 17 years old. She wanted to be a teacher. She was planning to apply to universities on other worlds next year. She died trying to lead younger children to safety. The scene shifted to show a teenage girl reading to a group of smaller children. Her voice was gentle and patient as she helped them sound out difficult words. When the plasma beam hit, she was still holding the book. Sarah Kim, Dr. James Wright, 845 other children and adults who were doing nothing more, threatening, then learning and growing and healing from the wounds of previous tragedies. The Vorthak delegation watched in growing discomfort as the scenes played around them. They saw children studying in bright classrooms. They saw teenagers working in gardens. They saw adults who had dedicated their lives to caring for kids who had already lost everything once. "Admiral," Military Commander Greshna said, "we understand that civilian casualties are regrettable, but in the context of territorial disputes, the space around them exploded into fire. Suddenly, they were experiencing the attack from inside the orphanage. Plasma beams tore through walls and ceilings. Children screamed as buildings collapsed around them. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. Bodies of kids who would never grow up lay scattered in smoking ruins. The Vorthak delegation flinched, back from the destruction, even though they knew it was just a simulation, but it felt real. The heat, the noise, the terror, it all felt absolutely real. Then the scene shifted again. Now they stood in a human military command center. Officers worked at tactical displays while Admiral Chen received reports from across human space. The messages all said the same thing. "We're ready for war." "You killed our children," Admiral Chen said simply. "So we thought you should understand what you've awakened." The walls around them began displaying human history. The Vorthak watched, in fascination and growing horror as scenes played out in rapid succession. Ancient human warriors fighting with crude metal weapons. Armies clashing across muddy battlefields. Cities burning as primitive aircraft dropped explosive bombs. Then came the nuclear age. Mushroom clouds rising over devastated cities. Missiles capable of ending civilization. Entire populations living under the constant threat of annihilation. We are a species, Admiral Chen explained, that once built weapons capable of cracking planets just to spite our enemies. We've spent 3 centuries learning to be better than our worst impulses. The scenes shifted to show human space exploration. Scientists working together to cure diseases. Diplomats negotiating peaceful solutions to conflicts. Traders sharing technology and resources with alien species. We've built a civilization based on cooperation, exploration, and growth. We help other species when they face disasters. We share our medical advances freely. We've worked hard to become the kind of people who build orphanages instead of weapons. The Vorthak watched humans rescuing alien refugees from natural disasters. They saw human doctors treating wounded soldiers from species they had never met. They observed human engineers helping to rebuild worlds devastated by war. But you touched our children. The displays around them changed again. Now they showed the current human mobilization. Fleet after fleet emerging from hidden bases. Weapons platforms that bent space-time itself. Factory ships building armadas in real time. The scale was staggering. The Vorthak had thought their empire was militarily powerful. They commanded 40 star systems and hundreds of warships. But humanity's response dwarfed anything they had imagined possible. Thousands of ships. Weapons that violated physical laws. Technology that could manipulate fundamental forces. And behind it all, 8 billion individual humans united in rage. This is what happens, Admiral Chen said, when you murder our young. Intelligence Director Cass Ray spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. Admiral, surely you're not suggesting that your entire species would go to war over one incident. The economic costs alone. Director, Admiral Chen interrupted, let me show you something. The space around them shifted to display Earth itself. Cities sprawled across continents. Billions of people going about their daily lives. Traffic flowing through streets. Children playing in parks. Then the news of Kepler 442b reached the planet. The Vorthak delegation watched as 8 billion humans received the same information simultaneously. They saw crowds gathering in silence. They witnessed parents holding their own children tighter. They observed ordinary civilians, shopkeepers, and teachers and farmers all asking the same question. How can we help? Economics? Admiral Chen asked. Director, our entire species just volunteered to bankrupt themselves if necessary to respond to what you did. Miners are giving up their life savings to buy weapons. Teachers are leaving their jobs to work in munitions factories. Children are donating their toys to be melted down for scrap metal. The scenes showed human colonies across known space. Every world, every station, every ship, all focused on the same goal. Not conquest or expansion or profit. Justice for murdered children. You see, Admiral Chen continued, most species think logically about war. They calculate costs and benefits. They consider economic impacts and strategic advantages. They make rational decisions about when violence is worth the price. The display shifted to show the human response to the AI rebellion centuries earlier. Entire fleets burning in space. Planets cracked open by weapons that shouldn't have existed. The systematic extermination of an enemy that had tried to enslave humanity. Humans aren't logical about children. We don't calculate costs when our young are threatened. We don't make rational decisions when someone hurts our kids. We just respond with everything we have until the threat is eliminated completely. Economic Minister Tethzo found his voice. But surely some form of compensation could be arranged. Additional payments, trade agreements. We could offer exclusive access to rare materials from our territory. Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, Minister, how much is a child worth? I don't understand the question. You offered us 1 million credits for 847 dead children. That works out to about 1,100 credits per child. Is that what you think a young life is worth? Tethzo shifted uncomfortably. The payment was meant to be symbolic, a gesture of regret for an unfortunate accident. An accident. Admiral, Chen's voice was very soft. Minister, would you like to see what our weapons targeting computers recorded during the attack? The space around them filled with tactical data, sensor readings, targeting solutions, firing patterns, all from the Vortex ships during the bombardment of Kepler 442b. Your ships fired 17 plasma bursts at the colony. 14 hit military and government targets with perfect precision. 2 hit civilian areas that could arguably be considered strategic targets. 1 hit an orphanage that was clearly marked on every civilian registry, protected under interstellar law and posed no possible military threat. The data showed the targeting computer's analysis. The orphanage had been identified as a civilian facility. Its protected status had been noted, and then it had been targeted anyway. That wasn't an accident, Minister. That was a choice. High Counselor Vashkol realized that the situation was far worse than he had imagined. The humans weren't just angry about civilian casualties. They had proof of deliberate targeting. They knew the orphanage had been hit intentionally. Admiral, he said carefully, what exactly do you want from us? Admiral Chen stood up, and the space around them changed one final time. Now they were looking at the current tactical situation. Human fleets positioned throughout Vorthak space, weapons platforms that could destroy entire systems, the industrial capacity to maintain this force indefinitely. Counselor, we want you to understand what you're facing. This isn't a territorial dispute or a trade disagreement. This is humanity responding to the murder of our children. We can continue this conversation in one of 2 ways. The display showed 2 different scenarios. In the first, the Vorthak formally acknowledged their crime, submitted to human justice, and accepted permanent oversight. In the second, human fleets swept through Vorthak space like a force of nature. Worlds burned, ships died. An entire civilization was reduced to scattered refugees fleeing into the galactic rim. You can choose justice, Admiral, Chen said, or you can choose annihilation. But you will choose, because 847 children are dead, and someone is going to be held accountable for that. The Vorthak delegation sat in stunned silence. They had come here expecting to negotiate terms with an angry but ultimately reasonable enemy. Instead, they had discovered that they were facing a species that would rather destroy everything than allow child killers to escape justice. The humans weren't interested in territory or resources or political advantage. They wanted something far more dangerous, moral accountability, and they had the power to enforce it. Admiral Chen stood at the center of the conference room, surrounded by the Vorthak High Council. The space around them had returned to its original state, empty void filled with distant stars. But the silence was heavy with the weight of everything they had just witnessed. You have seen what we are capable of, Admiral Chen said. You have seen our history, our technology, and our current mobilization. Now I will present you with 2 options. Choose carefully because this decision will determine the fate of your entire species. High Counselor Vashkol felt centuries of experience failing him. He had negotiated with dozens of alien species. He had ended wars and prevented conflicts through careful diplomacy. But he had never faced anything like this. The humans weren't interested in territory or trade routes or strategic advantages. They wanted something that the Vorthak barely understood: moral justice for dead children. Option 1, Admiral Chen continued, and the space around them filled with legal documents and treaty frameworks. The Vorthak hegemony formally acknowledges the war crimes committed at Kepler 442b. You submit to human justice protocols for the prosecution of those responsible. You pay reparations equal to your total military budget for the next century. And you accept permanent human observers in your territory to ensure that such incidents never happen again. Military Commander Greshna snarled softly. You're asking us to surrender our sovereignty to a species of mammals. No, Admiral Chen replied calmly. I'm asking you to accept responsibility for murdering children. There's a difference. The documents floating around them showed exactly what human justice would look like. War crimes tribunals. Individual accountability for officers who had targeted civilians. Compensation for the families of the dead. A complete restructuring of Vorthak military doctrine to prevent future atrocities. It was humiliating. It was comprehensive. It would effectively end the Vorthak Empire as it had existed for 3,000 years. Option 2, Admiral Chen said, and the documents vanished. The space around them filled with something far more terrifying. A complete simulation of what total war with humanity would look like. It began with the fleets that were already positioned in Vorthak space. 1,200 ships unleashing weapons that violated the known laws of physics. Vorthak defensive positions simply ceased to exist. Entire fleets were erased from reality in seconds. But that was just the beginning. More human forces arrived hourly. Factory ships that could build armadas faster than the Vorthak could destroy them. Construction platforms that turned asteroids into weapons in real time. Mobile space habitats that brought entire human cities into battle zones. The Vorthak fought back with everything they had. 40 star systems. Hundreds of ships. Weapons that had conquered dozens of other species. None of it mattered. Human technology was simply beyond anything the galaxy had seen before. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons. That could age matter at the atomic level. Defenses that turned enemy fire into harmless light. The simulation showed Vorthak worlds burning one by one. Not just military targets, but entire planets rendered uninhabitable. The human response wasn't conquest. It was extermination. This is what total war looks like when you face a species that considers child murder unforgivable, Admiral Chen explained as the Vorthak delegation watched their civilization die in accelerated time. We don't want your territory. We don't want your resources. We just want to make sure that nobody ever thinks it's acceptable to murder human children again. The simulation continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The Vorthak watched as their empire collapsed completely. Fleets scattered to the galactic rim. Populations evacuated to refugee camps on distant worlds. A proud civilization reduced to footnotes in history books. The choice is yours, Admiral Chen said as the simulation faded. Justice or annihilation. Accountability or extinction. Those are your only options. Intelligence Director Cass Ray spoke up, his voice barely steady. Admiral, surely you're not serious about committing genocide over one incident? Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she activated a device that none of the Vorthak had noticed before. A small sphere that had been sitting on the table since they arrived. Let me show you what genocide actually looks like, she said. Reality twisted around the Vorthak delegation. One moment they were sitting in the conference room. The next moment they were experiencing something impossible. They were no longer themselves. They were their own species, but living through a different timeline. A timeline where humanity had chosen option 2. High Counselor Vash Kol found himself standing in the ruins of his homeworld's capital city. Buildings that had stood for millennia were smoking wreckage. The sky was dark with ash and debris. Bodies lay scattered in the streets, not just soldiers but civilians, children. He felt the weight of absolute defeat, the knowledge that his people were dying across 40 star systems, the crushing realization that his species' entire history was about to end because they had murdered human children. He experienced the evacuation of the last Vorthak civilian transport. Families crowded into cargo holds, fleeing to unknown regions of space. Children crying for parents who would never come home. Elderly Vorthak dying of grief as they left the only worlds they had ever known. He felt his own death as human weapons found his command bunker. Not a quick death in battle, but a slow fade as the life support systems failed. Alone in the dark, knowing that he was the last of his kind to die because his species had chosen pride over accountability, the experience felt real, not just visually, but emotionally and physically. He felt the pain of his people's extinction as if it was actually happening. He experienced the absolute finality of civilizational death. Then he was back in the conference room, gasping for air that suddenly seemed precious beyond measure. That was a simulation, Admiral Chen said quietly. But every piece of technology you just experienced exists. Every human fleet movement you witnessed is already in motion. Every weapon you felt is currently targeting Vorthak positions throughout your territory. The other council members were having similar reactions. Economic. Minister Tethzo was shaking visibly. Military Commander Greshna had gone completely pale. Intelligence Director Cass-Ray looked like he was about to be sick. The difference between simulation and reality, Admiral Chen continued, is one decision. Your decision. Right here, right now. She gestured, and the space around them filled with real-time tactical displays. Human fleets in position throughout Vorthak space. Weapons platforms powered up and ready to fire. Construction ships building more military assets every hour, but also evacuation routes mapped for Vorthak civilians. Medical ships prepared to treat wounded. Plans for refugee assistance and resettlement programs. We can use all of this to save your people, Admiral Chen said. Or we can use it to demonstrate to the galaxy what happens when someone murders human children. The choice is entirely yours. High Counselor Vashkol looked around the table at his fellow council members. Centuries of Vorthak pride and military tradition warred with the absolute certainty of extinction. They could maintain their sovereignty and die with honor, or they could accept human justice and live with shame. Admiral, he said slowly, if we accept option 1, what happens to our people? Your civilization survives, Admiral Chen replied. Your species continues. Your children grow up to have children of their own. You lose your empire, but you keep your lives. And if we choose option 2, your species becomes extinct. Your worlds become memorial parks for murdered human children. Your names become synonyms for what not to do in every diplomatic academy in the galaxy. The choice was brutal in its simplicity. Survival or pride. Justice or annihilation. The future or the past. Military Commander Greshna found his voice first. Admiral, you're asking us to betray everything our species has stood for. Commander, I'm asking you to evolve into something better than child killers. But the honor of the hegemony... 847 dead children, Admiral Chen interrupted. Tell me about the honor in that. Greshna fell silent. Economic. Minister Tethzo tried a different approach. The economic impact of your demands would be catastrophic. Our people would suffer terribly. Not as much as they would suffer from extinction, Admiral Chen replied. Intelligence Director Cass-Ray made one last attempt. Admiral, surely you understand that no species can simply abandon their fundamental nature overnight. Admiral Chen smiled sadly. Director, you're right. That's why we're not asking you to change overnight. We're asking you to spend the next century learning to be better. With our help. She gestured, and the space around them showed what human justice actually looked like in practice. Not just punishment, but rehabilitation. Not just consequences, but education. Species that had committed crimes learning to build better societies. Former enemies becoming partners in exploration and growth. We've done this before, Admiral Chen explained. We've helped other species overcome their worst impulses. We can help you too, but only if you choose justice over pride. High Counselor. Vashkol closed his eyes and thought about the simulation he had just experienced. His homeworld in ruins. His people scattered and dying. The complete extinction of everything the Vorthak had ever built. Then he thought about the alternative. Survival. Growth. The possibility that future generations of Vorthak might look back on this moment as the beginning of something better, rather than the end of everything. Admiral, he said finally, we need time to discuss this among ourselves. Of course, Admiral Chen replied. You have 6 hours. That's how long it will take our fleets to finish their current positioning. After that, we begin implementation of either option 1 or option 2. A door materialized in the wall, leading to a private chamber where the Vorthak delegation could confer. As they filed through, Admiral Chen called after them. "Counselors, remember, this isn't really about justice for the dead. The dead are beyond justice. This is about the living. Your people, your children, your future. Choose wisely." The door closed behind them, leaving Admiral Chen alone in the conference room. She looked out at the stars and thought about 847 children who would never see those stars again. In 6 hours, she would either be implementing the most comprehensive justice program in galactic history, or she would be overseeing the extinction of an entire species. She hoped the Vorthak would choose wisely, but either way, the galaxy would remember what happened when someone murdered human children, and it would remember that humans always kept their promises, whether those promises were about justice or about annihilation. The choice was no longer hers to make. It belonged to the Vorthak High Council, sitting in their private chamber, deciding whether their species would have a future or only a past. Time would tell which they valued more, their pride or their children's lives.
Commander James Walker stared out the large window of Earth's space station. Massive alien ships hung in the black sky like giant metal islands. His hands tightened into fists behind his back. These visitors from the stars called themselves the Galactic Council. They had come 3 months ago, not with bombs or lasers, but with papers and rules. "You understand that these terms are final." Ambassador Krell's voice was smooth but cold. The alien skin was almost clear, showing strange organs pulsing underneath. "Earth may join our community of worlds, but only if you agree to these limits." Walker watched as Earth's leaders looked at each other around the large round table. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the station's air systems. On the table sat the treaty, a set of rules that would change human history forever. President Garcia picked up the document with a slight tremble in her hand. "And if we refuse?" Krell's 4 eyes blinked one after another in a rolling motion. "Then Earth remains alone. We control all paths to the stars. You would be isolated." The threat was clear. Isolation meant no trade, no new technology, no protection from other dangerous species that might find Earth. The Council ships in orbit were a constant reminder of how small humanity still was. Walker listened as Krell explained the rules again. No warships bigger than 100 meters, no advanced weapons, no more than 50 military ships total, strict limits on engine technology. It was like putting a leash on a dog they feared might bite. "We need time to discuss," said President Garcia. Krell nodded his long, thin head. "You have 1 Earth day." When the aliens left the room, the arguments began. Some leaders wanted to fight, to refuse the unfair rules. Others feared what would happen if they said no. Walker stayed quiet, watching and thinking. Later that night, Walker couldn't sleep. He stood in his small room on the station, looking down at the blue Earth. 28 years in the Navy had taught him to read between the lines. This wasn't about safety. It was about fear. "They're afraid of us," he said to his empty room. His computer beeped. A message from Admiral Thompson. "Meeting. Sector 7. 400 hours. Highest secrecy." The underwater base in the Pacific Ocean was one of Earth's best-kept secrets. Walker's small submarine docked at 3:58 a.m. Security scans checked his identity 3 times before he was allowed into the meeting room. Admiral Thompson was already there with 5 others. Dr. Reed, a physicist with wild hair and tired eyes. General Collins of the Global Defense Force. Director Lee from Intelligence. Dr. Morgan, a materials expert. And Rivera, the best electronics engineer in North America. "Thank you for coming," said Thompson. The Admiral was a tall, stern woman with gray hair cut short against her skull. "What I'm about to share does not leave this room." She turned on a screen showing the treaty. "We're going to sign this tomorrow." Walker couldn't hide his surprise. "We're giving in." Thompson's face showed no emotion. "On paper, yes, but I didn't invite you here to surrender." She pointed to a specific line in the document. "Look closer. The treaty limits military vessels. Dr. Reed smiled for the first time, but says nothing about research ships. Exactly, Thompson nodded. The council thinks they've caged us, but they've only told us what shape the bars are. She pressed a button, and the screen changed to show plans for a ship unlike anything Walker had seen before. This is Project Phoenix, she said. A ship that will obey every rule while breaking their spirit. Officially, it will be a deep space research vessel. Unofficially, a warship, Walker finished, studying the clever design. Hidden in plain sight. The council thinks we're simple and predictable, Thompson continued. That's their mistake. Throughout history, humans have excelled when backed into a corner. They're limiting us because they fear what we might become. General Collins cleared his throat. Intelligence has uncovered disturbing patterns in council behavior toward emerging species. They claim peaceful intentions, but their actions suggest control, not cooperation. Director Lee nodded. 3 advanced civilizations have mysteriously declined after council assistance. We don't intend to be the 4th. Walker looked at the plans again. This won't be easy. The council will watch us closely. One mistake and... That's why I need you to lead this, Thompson interrupted. Your engineering background, your combat experience, your ability to think creatively. You're perfect for this mission. Walker felt the weight of what she was asking. If we're caught, it's more than our careers. It would mean war when we're not ready. And if we do nothing, Dr. Reed said quietly, we accept a future where humans never reach their potential, where we're forever limited by someone else's fear. The room fell silent. Walker looked at each face around the table. They were asking him to risk everything on a hunch that the friendly aliens might not be so friendly. The treaty signing is tomorrow, Thompson said. I need your answer now, Commander. Walker thought about history, about how often trust had been misplaced, about how civilizations that couldn't defend themselves eventually disappeared. The Romans built roads to move their armies, he said finally. The council built treaties to stop ours. Both made the mistake of teaching their methods to others. He straightened his back. I'm in. Thompson allowed herself a small smile. Good. You leave for the asteroid belt in 3 days. Officially, you're leading a mining operation. Unofficially, you'll be building humanity's insurance policy. As the others discussed details, Walker's mind was already racing ahead. The council thought they knew human limits. They had studied our weapons, our ships, our tactics. But they had missed something important. Humans don't just break rules. They transform them. The treaty would be signed tomorrow. And in the shadows, Project Phoenix would rise. The old mining station floated silently among the asteroids. On paper, it was Mining Outpost 37B, abandoned after the platinum veins ran dry. In reality, it was now Phoenix Base, the secret birthplace of humanity's future. Commander Walker stepped out of the transport ship and looked around the main hangar. 3 months had passed since the treaty signing. The station still looked mostly abandoned, with old equipment gathering dust and lights flickering in the corridors. Perfect cover. It's not much to look at, said Dr. Reed, walking up beside him. The physicist looked even more tired than before, but there was fire in his eyes. That's the point, Walker replied. The council won't look twice at a dead mining operation. They walked through the station, passing small groups of workers disguised as miners and researchers. Everyone here had been hand-picked and sworn to secrecy. Most had family on Earth. A few had lost loved ones during the brief skirmishes when the council first arrived. This is our main work area, Reed said, pressing his hand against a scanner hidden inside an old control panel. A large wall slid open, revealing a vast chamber that had once been the main mining bay. Now it held something else entirely. The beginnings of a ship, broken into sections that didn't look like they belonged together. Walker nodded in approval. If anyone comes to inspect, each piece looks like separate research equipment. Exactly, Reed grinned. The front section is officially a deep space radiation study module. The middle is a gravitational wave detector. The rear section is just mining equipment storage. Walker walked around the pieces, studying the clever designs. How's the propulsion system coming? Reed led him to a sealed chamber where a strange engine sat on testing blocks. This is my favorite part. The council thinks they're limiting us with their approved technology list, but they don't understand how humans use tools. He pointed to various parts of the engine. This uses only materials and technology the treaty allows, but we've arranged them in ways they never imagined. It's like they gave us a piano, but only allowed us to play certain notes. They didn't realize we could create new songs with those same notes. Walker smiled. And weapons? Follow me. They entered a heavily shielded room where Dr. Morgan was testing what looked like mining lasers. The gray-haired woman looked up from her work. These are officially asteroid-cutting tools, she explained. But with some adjustments to the focusing crystals, she pressed a button and a beam shot out, slicing through a thick metal plate, as if it were paper. Will the council detect the energy signature? Walker asked. That's where I come in, said Rivera, appearing from behind a console. The young engineer pointed to a device attached to the weapon. This dampening field makes the energy output look like normal mining operations. To their sensors, we're just breaking up rocks. Walker spent the rest of the day touring the facility, meeting the team, and reviewing progress. By evening, he gathered everyone in the main hall. Nearly 100 people crowded into the space, all working on different aspects of the secret project. I won't lie to you, Walker said, his voice echoing in the metal chamber. What we're doing is dangerous. If the council discovers us, we could trigger the very conflict we're trying to prevent. He paused, looking at their determined faces, but sometimes the greater risk is doing nothing. The council claims to welcome us as equals, but their rules say otherwise. They fear our potential, and history shows that fear often leads to preemptive action. Walker pointed to the ship pieces visible through the large windows. Project Phoenix isn't about starting a war. It's about ensuring we can protect ourselves if their true intentions ever turn hostile. It's about keeping humanity's future in human hands. The room erupted in applause. These people had given up normal lives to work in secret on an asteroid. They believed in the mission. 6 months into construction, the ship was taking shape. The separate pieces were now clearly parts of a whole. What had begun as scattered sections was becoming a vessel unlike any humanity had built before. But progress brought danger. Council inspection ships began making regular patrols through the asteroid belt, monitoring mining activities. They're getting suspicious, Director Lee reported during her monthly visit. Our supply runs are drawing attention. Walker nodded. They had been smuggling materials through dozens of small civilian ships, each carrying just enough to avoid notice. But the pattern was becoming visible. We need a distraction, Walker decided. The opportunity came 2 weeks later. A council patrol ship approached the station for a surprise inspection. Walker was ready. Welcome to Outpost 37B, he said, greeting the 4-armed inspector at the airlock. We're conducting deep space research here. Nothing exciting. The alien sensors scanned constantly as Walker led him through carefully prepared areas of the station. Everything dangerous was hidden behind special walls that blocked scanning technology. What is happening in the east sector? The inspector asked suddenly. Its antenna twitched with suspicion. Walker kept his face calm while his mind raced. The east sector contained key weapon components impossible to explain. Old mining equipment, he said smoothly. Very unstable. In fact, a massive explosion rocked the station. Emergency alarms blared. What was that? The inspector's 4 arms reached for scanning tools. The unstable equipment I mentioned. Walker shouted over the noise. We need to evacuate this area immediately. In the confusion, Walker's team rushed the inspector back to his ship. The explosion, carefully planned and controlled, had destroyed an empty section of the station, but created enough chaos to end the inspection. After the council ship departed, Walker gathered his lead engineers. They'll be watching us more closely now, he warned. We need to move the most sensitive work deeper into the asteroid field. Dr. Reed nodded. We're still on schedule, but we'll need to be more careful with power usage. Any unusual energy spikes will bring them back. Walker looked through the viewport at the distant stars. Out there, the Council was spreading its influence, its rules, its control. Earth had gained access to some new technologies from the treaty, but at what cost? Their freedom to grow, to explore, to defend themselves, all limited by alien fear. We have 1 year to finish this ship, Walker told his team. After that, I believe the Council will tighten restrictions even further. They're watching how fast we adapt to the technologies they've shared. We'll be ready, Dr. Morgan promised. Humans work best under pressure. As the team returned to work, Walker studied the ship's growing outline against the blackness of space. The Phoenix was taking shape, not just a vessel of metal and energy, but a symbol of humanity's refusal to be caged. The Council had made rules to contain them, but they had forgotten that humans had been breaking rules since they first looked up at the stars and decided to reach them. 4 years had passed since Project Phoenix began. The ship was now 60% complete, hidden deep in the asteroid belt. What had started as separate pieces was now clearly a powerful vessel, even though much work remained. Commander Walker stood in the newly finished bridge, running his hand along the captain's chair. Screens lit up the circular room, showing the ship's systems and the space around them. The bridge still had exposed wires and missing panels, but it was taking shape. She's beautiful, said Dr. Reed, entering the bridge with a tablet in his hand. 4 more months, and the engine system will be fully online. Walker nodded. And weapons? Dr. Morgan says the main systems are ready for testing. We just need to find a safe time and place. Their conversation was interrupted when the bridge door slid open. Marcus Gray, the project's security officer, walked in with a serious look on his face. Gray was younger than most senior staff, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Commander, we need to talk, Gray said, his voice tense. Privately. Walker followed Gray to a small meeting room off the main corridor. Inside, Gray closed the door and activated a sound-blocking device. What is it? Walker asked. Gray placed a data pad on the table. I've been reviewing Council communications. Something doesn't add up. Explain. For 4 years, we've been building this ship because we believe the Council has hidden intentions, that they might turn against us. Gray's eyes locked with Walker's. But where's the proof? All I see is a peaceful alliance. They've shared medical technology that saved millions of lives. They've helped clean our oceans. Walker frowned. You know why we're here, Gray. The treaty restrictions are unfair, yes. Gray cut in. But maybe they're just being careful. Maybe we're the dangerous ones, building a secret warship while pretending to be friends. The room fell silent. Walker studied the younger man carefully. Gray had been with the project from the start, one of their most dedicated team members. This sudden doubt was troubling. You've seen the intelligence reports, Walker said finally. A pattern of how the Council treats rising species. Gray shook his head. Reports based on limited data and assumptions. Commander, what if we're wrong? What if we fire the first shot in a war that didn't need to happen? Walker leaned forward. This isn't about firing first. It's about making sure we can defend ourselves if necessary. That's what every arms race in history has claimed. Gray replied. I joined this project to protect Earth. Now I'm not sure if we're protecting it or endangering it. The argument spread beyond their private meeting. Within days, the project team was divided. Some agreed with Gray, questioning whether they were overreacting to the Council's rules. Others remained convinced of the danger. At dinner in the station's mess hall, the tension was visible. People who had worked side by side for years now sat at separate tables, talking in low voices. Dr. Morgan joined Walker at his table. This isn't good, she said quietly. Division is the last thing we need right now. Walker nodded. Gray has valid concerns. That's what makes this difficult. Do you think he would? She didn't finish the question. Report us to the council. Walker sighed. I don't know. He believes he's doing the right thing, whatever that is. The next morning, Gray was gone. His quarters were empty, and a small transport ship was missing from a hangar. Walker called an emergency meeting of the senior staff. We have to assume Gray is going to the council, he told them. We need to decide what to do. Dr. Reed looked pale. If he tells them about Phoenix, they'll come in force. We can't fight them yet. Could we hide the ship? Rivera suggested. Move it deeper into the belt. Not enough time, Walker said. And a power signature that big would be easy to track during transport. So we have two choices, Dr. Morgan said grimly. Abandon the project or accelerate it. Walker looked around the table. I need your honest opinions. Do we continue? The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Dr. Reed spoke. I've spent 4 years of my life here because I believe in what we're doing. Gray might be right. Maybe the council means well. But what if he's wrong? Can we take that chance? One by one, the others nodded in agreement. Then it's decided. Walker said, we accelerate. Full shifts around the clock. We launch in 6 months, ready or not. 2 weeks passed with no sign of council ships. The team worked frantically, completing systems that should have taken months in just weeks. Sleep became a luxury as everyone pushed themselves to the limit. Then, unexpectedly, a small ship approached the station. Walker ordered battle stations, fearing the council had found them. But it was Gray's transport, returning alone. Walker met him in the hangar, flanked by armed security. Gray stepped out of his ship looking exhausted but determined. You didn't go to the council, Walker said. Surprise. No, Gray replied. I went to find answers. In Gray's ship was a secure container filled with data drives. Gray had traveled to the edge of council space, using his intelligence training to hack into restricted archives. What he found confirmed their worst fears. In the station's main hall, Gray showed the evidence to the entire team. The files revealed that 3 other species who had advanced too quickly had been secretly undermined by the council, one through engineered resource shortages, another through political manipulation. The third simply disappeared from all records after safety concerns. They call it containment, Gray explained, his voice hollow. Species that develop too quickly are seen as threats to stability. Earth's rapid progress from simple flight to space travel in less than a century frightens them. Walker studied the translated documents carefully. The treaty wasn't about protecting the galaxy from us. No, Gray agreed. It was about making sure we could never challenge them. They're not preparing for our aggression, Commander. They're preparing to eliminate our potential. The division among the crew vanished overnight. Even those who had doubted now understood the truth. The Council's friendly face hid darker intentions. Not immediate destruction, but a slow, controlled decline of human civilization. I'm sorry I doubted, Gray told Walker privately. I needed to be sure. Walker put a hand on his shoulder. You did the right thing. Questioning is how we avoid becoming what we fear. With renewed purpose, the team returned to work. The ship, now officially named the Defiance, was no longer just a contingency plan. It was humanity's best hope for a future free from alien control. As Walker looked at the half-finished vessel through the viewport, he felt a mix of pride and urgency. They were building more than a ship. They were building a chance. The alarms blared throughout Phoenix Base, their urgent wail bouncing off metal walls. Commander Walker ran to the control room, where screens showed a Council deep space monitoring ship just entering the outer asteroid belt. They've detected something, Reed said, his fingers flying over the controls. Power surges from our last engine test. Walker's mind raced. The Defiance wasn't ready. Key systems remained unfinished. Weapons were installed but not fully calibrated. The revolutionary drive system worked, but not at full power. How long until they reach us? Walker asked. 3 hours, maybe 4 if the asteroids slow them down, Rivera answered from another console. Walker made the hardest decision of his life. Launch the ship. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at him. But, Commander, Dr. Morgan protested, we're not ready. Half the internal systems aren't connected. The outer hull has gaps in 3 sections. We have no choice, Walker said firmly. If they find this base, everything we've worked for ends. At least in space, we have a chance. Walker activated the station-wide communication system. All Phoenix personnel, this is Commander Walker. We are launching immediately. This is not a drill. All crew assigned to the Defiance, report to your stations. Everyone else, begin erasing all project data and prepare to evacuate. The next 2 hours were controlled chaos. Essential supplies were loaded onto the ship. Engineers rushed to connect critical systems. Crew members said hasty goodbyes to those staying behind. Dr. Reed found Walker on the bridge. Commander, we've managed to get life support stable. Engines are at 40% capacity. It's not pretty, but she'll fly. Walker nodded. That will have to be enough. As the countdown began, Walker looked around the bridge. Stations designed for 5 people were being manned by 2 or 3. Screens flickered with incomplete data. Exposed wires hung from ceiling panels. Launching in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The ship shuddered as the docking clamps released. Slowly, the Defiance rose from its birthplace, thrusters pushing it away from the asteroid. For the first time, the massive ship moved under its own power. Walker felt a strange mix of pride and fear. The Defiance was approximately 300 meters long, 3 times the size allowed by the treaty. Its unusual design resembled no traditional warship, with sections that looked like they didn't belong together. This strange appearance was deliberate, allowing each component to be disguised as something innocent. Council ship has changed course, Rivera reported. They detected our launch. Take us into the denser part of the belt, Walker ordered. Use the asteroids for cover. The Defiance moved deeper into the asteroid field, its untested engines struggling with precise maneuvers. Twice they barely avoided collisions with large rocks. Inside the ship, engineers worked frantically to connect systems while in flight. Gray entered the bridge with a data pad. Commander, I've intercepted Council communications. They're calling for reinforcements. 3 hunter ships are already on their way. How soon? 6 hours. Maybe less. Walker turned to his navigation officer. Set course for Neptune. We can hide in its atmosphere while we complete repairs. Sir, the young officer replied. With our engines at partial power, that trip will take at least 12 hours. Then we better hope they don't find us before then, Walker said. As the Defiance made its slow journey toward the outer planets, Admiral Thompson sent an encrypted message from Earth. Council representatives demanding ship surrender, threatening sanctions against Earth. Buy time if possible. Walker knew what that meant. Earth's governments couldn't openly support them now. The Defiance was on its own. For 10 hours, they managed to avoid detection, using a combination of stealth technology and the natural cover of the asteroid belt. Engineers worked non-stop, connecting systems and sealing hull breaches. Dr. Reed managed to boost engine power to 60%. Then a sensor alert sounded. Council hunter ship detected, called out the sensor operator. Range, 2 million kilometers and closing fast. They found us, Rivera said grimly. Walker made another difficult decision. Change course. Head for Jupiter's moons. We'll use Eo's volcanic activity to mask our energy signature. The Defiance altered course, pushing its engines harder than was safe. Warning lights flashed across engineering consoles, but Dr. Reed kept the ship moving. Hunter ship is gaining, Gray reported. Their weapons are charging. How far to Io? Walker asked. 20 minutes at current speed. We won't make it, said Dr. Morgan. Walker stood from his chair. Then we fight. Prepare all weapons. This is what we built her for. Across the ship, crew members moved to battle stations. Weapon systems came online. Shield generators hummed to life. Hunter ship in firing range, Gray announced. Evasive maneuvers, Walker ordered. Let's see what this ship can do. The Defiance turned sharply, showcasing agility that surprised even its creators. The Hunter ship fired, its energy beams slicing through space where the Defiance had been moments before. Return fire, Walker commanded. The Defiance fired its main weapons for the first time. Beams of concentrated energy shot toward the Hunter ship. The first missed, but the second struck its target, causing visible damage to the Council vessel's outer hull. Direct hit, cheered the weapons officer. But their celebration was short-lived. 2 more Hunter ships appeared on sensors. We're outnumbered, Gray said. Walker studied the tactical display. We don't need to win. We just need to survive. He pointed to a cluster of small moons ahead. Take us there. Use their gravity to accelerate, and then cut power. We'll drift and let them pass. The Defiance raced toward the moons, taking hits that shook the entire ship. Damage reports flooded in from multiple decks. 3 crew members were injured when a power conduit exploded. Approaching the gravity well, Reed announced, "Ready to cut power on your mark." "Wait for it," Walker said, watching the pursuing ships. Now, the Defiance went dark, its momentum carrying it around the small moon. The Hunter ships overshot their position, searching in the wrong place. "Minimal power only," Walker ordered. "Emergency repairs to all damaged systems. We need to be ready to move the moment they find us again." As the Council ships searched the area, the crew of the Defiance worked in near darkness, fixing what they could. Walker moved through the ship, helping where needed, encouraging his people. In the medical bay, he found several injured crew members. "Was it worth it, Commander?" asked one young engineer with a bandaged arm. "Building this ship, breaking their rules." Walker looked around at the wounded but determined faces. "Ask me again when we're free," he replied. "Freedom always has a cost. The question is whether the price is worth paying." In the distance, the Hunter ships continued their search pattern. Soon, they would find the Defiance again. The game of cat and mouse would resume. But now they knew something important. The Defiance could fight. Humanity could stand against Council technology. The ship wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was a proven weapon. And across the solar system, word of their battle was spreading, despite Council censorship. The Defiance had fired the first shot in humanity's fight for independence. 2 weeks after their first battle, the Defiance hid in the thick clouds of Titan, Saturn's largest moon. The ship had found temporary safety, using the moon's dense atmosphere and strong magnetic field to hide from Council sensors. Commander Walker stood in the newly repaired engineering section, watching Dr. Reed and his team work on the engines. "How much longer?" Walker asked. Reed wiped sweat from his forehead. "Another day, maybe 2. We've fixed most of the battle damage. The drive system is now at 85% capacity." Walker nodded. Despite the challenges, they had accomplished something remarkable. The ship had survived its first battle, proving that humans could stand against Council technology. "Commander," Gray's voice came through the communication system. "Emergency message from Earth. You need to see this." Walker rushed to the bridge. On the main screen was Admiral Thompson's face, the transmission heavily encrypted to avoid detection. "Walker, the situation has changed," Thompson said, her image breaking up with static. "After your battle, the Council declared Earth in breach of treaty. Their ships have formed a blockade around our planet. No vessels can leave or enter." Walker felt cold dread in his stomach. Casualties? None yet, but the Council has taken more direct control over Earth governments. They're confiscating technology, claiming it's for safety assessment. Their representatives are in every major capital. Thompson's face hardened. "They're demanding we surrender the Defiance and everyone involved in its creation. And if we refuse, they've introduced something called containment protocol. They won't explain exactly what it means, but from Gray's intelligence we know." Thompson didn't need to finish the sentence. Containment meant the slow death of human independence, or worse. "We can't fight their entire fleet," Walker said. "No, but something interesting is happening," Thompson replied. "Your battle has spread across Earth's communications. Despite Council censorship, people know about the Defiance. It's becoming a symbol. Several nations have begun their own secret projects, inspired by what you've done." Walker was surprised. Other ships, smaller vessels, but yes. And some council members seem uncomfortable with their leadership's actions. 3 alien diplomats have secretly contacted us, offering information about council fleet movements and internal divisions. The transmission began breaking up more severely. "We're out of time," Thompson said urgently. "The council has issued an ultimatum. We have 7 Earth days to surrender all unauthorized technology. After that, containment begins. Walker, whatever you're going to do it now." The screen went dark. Walker turned to his bridge crew. Their faces showed determination mixed with fear. "Prepare the ship," he ordered. "We launch in 6 hours. Where are we going?" Rivera asked. Walker's eyes were hard. "To save Earth." The Defiance left Titan's atmosphere at full power, no longer hiding. As they approached the edge of the solar system, long-range sensors detected a Council enforcement fleet, 15 warships forming a battle line. "They're waiting for us," Gray said. Walker wasn't surprised. "Send the signal." Minutes later, 3 smaller ships appeared on sensors, moving to join the Defiance. They were Earth vessels, built in secret by other nations after hearing about Project Phoenix. These ships were smaller than the Defiance, but shared its innovative design philosophy, using allowed technology in ways the Council never expected. "This is Captain Lee of the Freedom," came a voice over the communication system. "Chinese-European Alliance, reporting for duty." "Captain Rodriguez of the Esperanza," said another. "South American Union, ready to stand with you." "Captain Okafor of the Unity," said a third. "African Coalition, prepared to fight." Walker felt a surge of pride. Humanity had united in the face of external control. "This is Commander Walker of the Defiance. Together, we make our stand." The 4 human ships formed their own line, facing the much larger Council fleet. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but not outsmarted. "All ships, prepare for battle," Walker said. "Remember the plan. We're not here to destroy them, but to show them we cannot be controlled." The Council fleet commander sent a message. "Human vessels, power down and prepare to be boarded. This is your only warning." Walker looked at his crew, seeing determination in their eyes. "No," he replied simply. "Humanity decides its own future." The battle began. Council ships fired first, their advanced weapons lighting up space. The human vessels scattered, using the maneuverability that Dr. Reed's innovative drive systems provided. The Defiance took hit after hit, its shields weakening. But it gave as good as it got, its weapons finding weak points in Council ship designs. "Our shields can't take much more," Rivera reported after 20 minutes of intense fighting. Walker knew it was time for their final gambit. "All power to engines," he ordered. "We're going for their command ship." The Defiance surged forward, diving straight toward the largest Council vessel. Council ships fired desperately, trying to stop what looked like a suicide run. "They think we're going to ram them," Gray said. "Let them think that." Walker replied calmly. "Stand by on the broadcast system." The Defiance came within firing range of the Council command ship, then did something unexpected. Instead of attacking, it transmitted every piece of evidence Gray had gathered about the Council's true intentions. The transmission went to every ship in the fleet, including Council vessels. The effect was immediate. 3 Council ships stopped firing. Then another. The evidence showing how Council leadership had manipulated not just humanity but many of their own member species created confusion in their ranks. "Several Council ships are standing down," Gray reported, amazed. They're talking to each other, arguing with their command. What had begun as a battle was becoming something else. A moment of truth. The Council fleet commander demanded his ships continue fighting, but more and more refused. Many of the alien crews had never known their leaders' true plans for controlling emerging species. The Defiance took heavy damage in the process. Fires broke out on 3 decks. The bridge lost power, switching to emergency systems, but they held their position, continuing to broadcast the truth. Finally, an unexpected message came through. "This is Sub-Commander Vrel of the Council Vessel Justice. We request dialogue. Too much has been hidden from us." Walker exchanged glances with his bridge crew. This was more than they had hoped for. Division within the Council itself. "This is Commander Walker. We accept." 1 month later, Walker stood in the same orbital diplomatic station where the original treaty had been signed. This time, the meeting was different. Representatives from Earth sat as equals with a reformed Council delegation. The old Council leadership had been removed after the evidence of their manipulation became widely known. "We deeply regret the actions of our former leaders," said Vrel, now leading the Council delegation. "The restrictions placed on Earth were never about safety. They were about control. That ends today." A new treaty was signed, one that recognized Earth's right to defend itself and determine its own path among the stars. The unfair limitations on human technology were removed. In return, Earth agreed to certain reasonable safeguards that applied equally to all species. Later, as the diplomatic team celebrated, Walker found himself looking out the same viewport where his journey had begun. The Defiance, now undergoing repairs in Earth orbit, was visible in the distance. Dr. Reed joined him. "You know what's funny?" Reed said. "Their rules were meant to stop us, but they only made us more creative. If they had truly welcomed us as equals from the start, we might never have built the Defiance." Walker nodded. "They tried to cage a species that has never accepted cages." He looked at the stars beyond. "They didn't understand something important about humans." "What's that?" Reed asked. "We don't just break rules," Walker said with a smile. "We transform them into something better." Earth would now join the galactic community not as a controlled member, but as a full partner, with all the rights and responsibilities that came with it. The path ahead would not be easy, but it would be their own. And the Defiance, once a secret born of fear, would become something new. The first ship of a fleet that would carry humanity's spirit of innovation and determination to the stars.